Hi, Movies Recaps here. Today I'll tell you about a horror movie called Outside. Spoilers ahead. Stay alert and be safe. The movie begins in the Philippines, where most major cities have fallen to hordes of mindless and vicious zombies. The story follows our protagonist, Francis Abel, who has managed to escape Manila with his wife Iris and their two sons, Josh and Lucas. Eventually, they arrive at an old, seemingly deserted house. Francis grabs a metal pipe for protection and cautiously enters. As he explores the dark interior, faint noises from upstairs catch his attention, prompting him to investigate further. He enters a room to discover a lifeless man lying on a bed. A gun near the man's hand suggests he ended his own life. Francis picks up the gun and the wristwatch to track time, then exits the room and heads outside. At the front door, he notices an older woman who has turned into a zombie. It's revealed that the man in the room was Francis's father, and the zombie is his mother. She attacks him, leaving him no choice but to shoot her. After this horrifying reunion, Francis buries his parents in the nearby cornfield. The Abel family decides to spend the night in the house. While everyone else sleeps, Francis stays awake, keeping watch the entire time. The next morning, he inspects the water supply. Once he ensures it's safe, he allows his sons to use it. However, Iris is unhappy about being trapped in the house. Later, Francis takes Josh, his older son, with him to investigate another house nearby. There, they come across a radio, a flashlight, and some chickens locked in a cage. They also stumble upon the owner's lifeless body hanging from the roof. Francis orders Josh to retrieve the keys dangling from the body's belt. As Josh pulls at the keys, the body unexpectedly falls on him. Although Josh is visibly hurt, Francis does not assist him. He believes his son needs to learn how to handle difficult situations on his own. Later that afternoon, Iris takes Francis to the basement of the house to look for any tools or supplies that might still be there. It is revealed that Francis's father was abusive and often punished him by locking him in the basement. Though the trauma lingers, Francis steps into the room and finds a generator that has run out of fuel. During dinner that evening, Iris suggests they should head north, a short distance away, because she feels unsafe staying there. However, Francis insists they remain, arguing it's safer without anyone else around. The next morning, the couple has a private conversation near the cornfield surrounding the house. It is revealed that Josh is not Francis's biological son, which explains why he treats him differently than Lucas. Iris once again urges Francis to consider moving north, where the government instructed survivors to go. Francis reluctantly agrees, prioritizing the safety of his family. Soon after, the family sets off in their van, with Francis driving while Iris navigates their road. The journey seems uneventful until Josh accidentally reveals that Iris recently received a phone call from Francis's estranged brother, Diego. This revelation enrages Francis, causing him to lose focus and crash into a blockade on a bridge. The family quickly realizes the van cannot proceed any further. Francis suggests returning to the house, but Iris steps out, armed with a blade, and begins cutting through the barricade. Her efforts, however, make too much noise, attracting a zombie soldier from nearby. Francis hurries to her aid and shoots the zombie, but as he helps her to her feet, more zombies appear behind the van, trapping their sons inside. Just when it seems the boys are doomed, the parents spring into action. Francis courageously shoots at the zombies, drawing them away from the van. Meanwhile, Iris seizes the chance to rescue their sons. Francis then grabs a grenade from the fallen soldier and sprints across the tops of cars, creating distance between himself and the horde. After finding cover behind a vehicle, he tosses the grenade, annihilating the pursuing zombies. With the danger gone, Francis reunites with his family, and they all make their way back to the house. 2 weeks later, Francis sneaks back to the bridge to retrieve the van and discovers it's still operational. He prepares to drive it back to the house but hesitates. For reasons unknown, he decides he doesn't want his family to leave his ancestral home. When he returns, Francis lies to Iris, claiming the van is broken down. Instead, he uses the fuel to power the generator and surprises his family with electricity, air conditioning, and even music. The next morning, Francis visits the chicken cage to collect eggs for breakfast, only to find a dog inside that has killed the chickens. The dog attacks him, biting his hand. Iris later treats the wound and suggests they search for a hospital, as they lack the necessary medication to treat rabies. But once again, Francis refuses to leave the supposed safety of the house. Meanwhile, Josh picks up a faint message on the radio about a nearby camp, but can't make out the full details. That evening, he shares this information with his parents during dinner, sparking a heated argument. Iris insists that they should leave and search for the camp, but Francis is adamant about staying, reminding her of the dangers they faced outside. He also accuses her of being overly interested in his estranged brother, Diego. The next morning, while repairing the chicken cage, Francis is approached by Josh, who asks him to turn on the generator. Francis refuses, leading to a tense confrontation. He challenges Josh, asking if he's willing to kill to protect the family as Francis did at the bridge. When Josh confidently says he can, Francis takes him to a nearby field to teach him how to use a gun. However, the gunshots catch Iris's attention, and she hurries to the field. To her horror, she witnesses Francis pressuring Josh in a way eerily similar to how his own father tormented him as a child. Just as she is about to intervene, the sound of the gunfire draws a group of zombies to their location. The family hastily retreats to the house with the zombies chasing them. They barricade the doors and flee upstairs, but the undead manage to break in through the doors and windows. When all hope seems lost, a jeep appears outside the house, drawing the zombies away. The next morning, Francis ventures to a nearby river and discovers that their savior is none other than his brother Diego. During their conversation, it becomes clear that Josh is actually Diego's biological son. The brothers reflect on their past, with Diego apologizing for his mistakes and revealing that he came to offer his help. However, Francis, consumed by his ego, refuses Diego's help and even draws his gun, aiming it at his brother. Unwilling to escalate the situation, Diego decides to leave, but not before handing Francis a map to the camp. After Diego departs, Francis contemplates burning the map, but changes his mind at the last moment. He later returns home and lies to his family, claiming that Diego was already dead when he found him. Francis then focuses on fortifying the house, repairing and boarding up the windows. Meanwhile, Lucas, while playing, follows a fly that leads him to the basement. From there, he notices a zombie lurking outside the house. Iris joins him and observes that the zombies appear to be growing weaker by the day. She reassures Lucas that the creatures will eventually die off from starvation and promises him that life will return to normal. Unbeknownst to them, Francis is eavesdropping from behind the basement door. Unlike his family, Francis doesn't want this to end. That afternoon, while wandering around the farm, he encounters a frail zombie and kills it immediately. Francis then fabricates a story, telling his family that numerous zombies are still roaming the farm. It's clear he's trying to discourage them from venturing outside. Later that night during dinner, Josh mentions seeing a map in Francis's possession. The map shows directions to a camp up north where they could all find safety. Hearing this, Francis grows increasingly controlling, attempting to convince Iris that they should stay on the farm and start a new life. He even suggests they should plan for another child, framing it as a fresh start for their family. However, Iris refuses to agree with him, pointing out that their lives are far from the normalcy they once had. She reminds Francis that their food supplies are running low, and that he should focus on their survival. She suggests they venture outside to gather food from the surrounding area. This simple suggestion triggers Francis's anger, and he begins to air their marital issues in front of their sons. He reveals that Iris had been planning to leave him just before the zombie outbreak. Iris admits the truth, explaining that she is no longer happy with their life together. She pleads with him to give her the map for the sake of their children, but Francis, in a fit of rage, burns the map in front of her. The next morning, he heads out to the farm in search of food, but only manages to find some sugarcane. While harvesting it, he hears distant gunfire, a clear sign that people are nearby, likely fighting zombies. That night, Francis brings a large wooden beam from the basement, uses it to block the front door, and secures it with a chain. Iris and Josh grow increasingly frustrated with his controlling behavior. Josh finally snaps and accuses Francis of behaving just like his own abusive father. This accusation enrages Francis, and he hits Josh. Before the argument can escalate further, they hear a knock at the door. A voice from outside identifies itself as a soldier, pleading desperately to be let in. Although Francis refuses to help, Josh defies him and removes the wooden barrier. A wounded soldier, Corcara, stumbles inside and collapses, begging for medical assistance. Iris, being a nurse, quickly tends to his injuries and questions him about what happened. Corcara reveals that he is from a nearby camp. He explains that his convoy was attacked by a group of zombies while returning from a supply run. Corcara reveals that everyone in his group was killed, and he barely managed to escape. He was cornered by zombies, but was saved by a man who directed him toward the house. Iris suspects this mysterious savior might have been Diego. Francis reluctantly agrees to help Corcara, but insists that the soldier must stay in the basement overnight. Later that night, while everyone is asleep, Josh confides in Iris, revealing his plan to leave the house in search of Diego or the camp. He also admits that he knows the truth about his parentage, but still considers Francis his real father. The next morning, Francis finds Corcara having breakfast with Lucas, but notices that Josh is missing. He questions Iris, but she remains silent. Enraged, Francis searches the house and discovers that Josh's bedroom door is unlocked. Realizing that Josh has escaped, Francis loses his temper. Consumed by rage, Francis storms back to the kitchen, picks up a hammer, and violently strikes Corcara in the head. The soldier's blood splatters across the dining table as the rest of the family looks on in horror. Francis then turns to Iris and knocks her unconscious with a brutal punch. When Iris regains consciousness, she finds that Francis has locked her and Lucas in the basement. Meanwhile, Francis's sanity begins to unravel completely. He descends into madness, killing the dog that ate the chicken, cooking its meat, and bringing it to the basement dressed in Corcora's military uniform. When his family refuses to eat the meal, Francis furiously smashes the plate on the ground. He then recounts how his father would punish him as a child for leaving food unfinished. Later, Iris and Lucas secretly devise a plan to escape their captivity. Their attempt is soon interrupted when Francis wakes from a nap to the sound of Lucas's screams. Francis rushes to the basement upon hearing Lucas's screams, but as soon as he enters, Iris strikes him with a heavy object. He collapses, temporarily unconscious, giving Iris the chance to grab the keys. She and Lucas finally escape the basement. When Francis regains consciousness, he tries to pursue them, but finds himself trapped in the basement, haunted by flashbacks of his abusive father locking him in there as punishment. Meanwhile, Iris grabs supplies, including a blade, and flees the house with Lucas. Just as they are about to leave, a zombified Diego attacks them. The two rush back inside, but Diego grabs Iris by the leg. When Lucas tries to intervene, Diego turns on him instead. At that moment, Francis emerges from the basement and comes to their rescue. He kills the zombie, but not before Diego bites Lucas on the hand. Now faced with a dire choice, Iris decides to amputate Lucas's arm to prevent him from turning into a zombie. However, Francis intervenes, insisting there must be another way. He convinces Iris that they must take Lucas to the nearest medical center. Francis hurries to the bridge where he left their van days earlier, but tragedy strikes. Josh, who had been wandering near the bridge with a gun he scavenged from a soldier's corpse, mistakes Francis, still wearing a blood-soaked military uniform, for a zombie. Acting out of fear, Josh accidentally shoots him. Realizing his mistake, Josh rushes to his father's side, apologizing profusely. Francis, despite his pain, reassures Josh, telling him he has always considered him his son. In his final moments, Francis instructs Josh to take the van and save Iris and Lucas. The movie ends with Josh returning to the house in the van, much to Iris's relief. But to be honest, Lucas is totaled. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more recaps like this.